So in the last video, we talked about I introduced the close reading strategies. And after looking at your notes and your first submission, I wanted to clarify a few things. Some of you got it pretty well, but the majority of you are still a little iffy on steps 1 and steps 2. Sorry. So to clarify, the understanding is that basic, what's going on in this scene, the noticing. What I want to add on to what we discussed yesterday is the fact that you need to annotate. So it's not just about highlighting. You need to annotate what you're highlighting and why, like what's the purpose of it. Sometimes that'll be like a one-word annotation, and sometimes it's going to be a little bit more lengthy. The explaining part, that's where we all struggled, most of us. I would say out of the 30 students I have, maybe 5 of you got it based on the people who turned it in. So I'm going to give you another example of that. Also, I'm going to give you an opportunity to self-check your own highlighting and annotating. So what I did is I went back through, and you'll remember that at that first paragraph, we did that in the previous video. And then I went back through and annotated and highlighted. So if you want to pause the video for a second or take a screenshot of this to see and kind of compare and contrast what you have with your own highlighting. You might have some very different things from me, but I do want you to notice that some of these things are just, what do I notice about what's being included in that paragraph, and some of these things are the vocabulary words that we reviewed last week. So you might want to have those bookmarked in Quizlet or on your phone or on your computer so you can pull them up every time I ask you to do a close reading to kind of refresh your memory of what kinds of things you're looking for. It's also an easier way to learn the words instead of just memorizing to regurgitate on a test. So that being said, if you want to take a screenshot, get a look at what I highlighted, and then you can ask me questions if you need to compare, if you think you had something different and you want to know if what you had was right. Okay, so this was what we went over in the first video. And then this is my second example of the step 2, the explaining. Now, a couple of things before I give you this example. What you need to remember for explanations, and some of you didn't even have a description of explanation in your notes. This is what the author does. You're explaining what the author does with the language that you noticed and how that choice, whatever the author did, impacted your understanding of the text. So first rule, your author that you're analyzing is probably going to be the subject of most of your sentences, because that's what you're focusing on, is what the author has done with his or her language. Second, you need to have specific examples, whether or not you pull full lines or embed words. And the last thing, I mentioned this briefly with my afternoon class, but I don't think I touched on it in the morning class, is that even though I'm talking about how I understand the text, I'm not actually speaking in the third person. I'm an objective analyzer in this situation, so I'm always going to be writing in the third person. So I shouldn't be using pronouns like I or my or us or our. So that being said, this example of step 2, I pulled several things that I noticed about her style. Lee juxtaposes the parent figures in the narrator's life, establishing a, quote, satisfactory, unquote, relationship with her father, with the briefest of paragraphs followed by a lengthy paragraph filled with several compound, complex sentences, listing the myriad qualities of her mother figure, Calpurnia. Lee continues the characterization of Scout's relationship with Calpurnia, intimating Scout's butt well knew the bed slat width of Calpurnia's hand. This further establishes the sassiness of the speaker's character as well. So in here you'll notice that I'm talking about what the author's doing with her language choice here. and I'm talking about the impact it has, not just on the plot, but what impact it's going to have on the reader. Okay, so I'm talking about the relationship here, which is all basically characterization, which is the main point of my paragraph here. So this is all so I understand what the author's choice of language and rhetoric has, what impact that has on the elements of the reading and not just the plot. Some of you wrote about the characters as though they were making their own individual decisions, when they, in fact, they're not, since they're figments of the author's imagination. So keep that in mind, that we're analyzing what impact the author's choices have on the way the book is meant to be understood.